Welcome to ACOS, All Kinds of Stuff, the podcast that, just like its host, has a hard time focusing on just one thing. So we talk about a little bit of everything. Glad you're here. Let's get this party started. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to ACOS. Today we're going to talk about coaching our own kids. For me, that means coaching my sons. That could be coaching your daughters. My sister, who lives in Boston, Massachusetts, has been coaching her daughter for a while, and all these pee-wee / little dribbler, whatever they're called these days. The one I'm currently involved in is called Cooper Hoopsters because it's Lubbock Cooper. Now, I have experience being coached by my father, but I have no experience in coaching my own kids. So we're going to get into it a little bit, and this is going to be a three-parter. Now, it won't be three in a row, but it will be three parts, and it'll make sense why we're not going three in a row as I kind of get to the end of this deal. But let's start with the experience of being coached by my own dad. Now, it was a little different because it wasn't in pee-wee sports. I didn't get to play any pee-wee sports. Okay, first off, I'm old. And for those people that are kind of my era, there weren't quite the amount of opportunities then that exist today. Now, there was little dribblers. I do not remember pee-wee football existing. If it did exist, I don't know that it did in Idalou, Texas, which is where I grew up, which was a very small town. It wasn't a very small town. It is still a very small town. It still exists. It has not been taken out of existence, but none of that existed. Soccer for sure didn't exist, and soccer's the one sport both of my sons played the whole time coming up. They did it through their church, through Upward Bound. But going back to me, there wasn't a lot of opportunity. I don't think my father would have let me play even if there was, because as stated in the first episode, my father was a very successful high school football coach. At the time, when I was young enough to do these kind of things, we were living in Idalou, Texas, which is a really small town 10 miles outside of Lubbock. Well, the first time I remember even hearing about little dribblers was they wanted to hold me back. I had finished my sixth grade year, and in my current sixth grade class, there were only 11 boys. And so my dad, being the head football coach in Idalou, Texas, looked down and thought, well, all it's going to take is one of those kids to fail and become ineligible, because with no pass, no play, if you make below a 70, you can't play. And my dad was like, well, they won't even have a team. And so he decided to hold me back. I tell everybody that'll listen, it wasn't because of academics, but nobody ever believes me. And so I got to spend 2 years in the sixth grade. And to make amends, my mom and dad said, you know what, we're going to let you play little dribblers, pee-wee basketball. But they conveniently didn't tell me that until registration was already too late to get in. So I think they did that on purpose. So the very first time I got coached by my dad was when it really counted. And I think that's the biggest difference between what I'm doing for my son and what my dad did for me. So he was the athletic director, head coach. I spent one more year in the sixth grade in Idalou, and then we moved to Sweetwater, Texas. Now, Sweetwater, if you're a Texas football person, you know that they've had very successful teams throughout their history. So we moved to Sweetwater, Texas when I'm in the seventh grade, and my dad does not coach middle school, but he comes and watches. He does not coach me as a freshman or a JV kid, but he comes and watches. So the very first time he actually was my legitimate coach was my junior year in high school. And I was the quarterback. And I think my father, who is still alive to this day, I think he would tell you he went overboard that first year to make sure every other player knew he was not giving me special treatment. That does not mean my father was a mean man, but it also doesn't mean my father was a nice man to me. Now, we're only talking in athletics. We would get home. It wasn't like the movies Friday Night Lights and all that. We didn't get home and go out to the backyard and work on plays. And at dinner, he didn't get the salt shaker and the pepper shaker and start lining up defenses. He was really good about keeping it at work. But as football coaches do, at work meant pretty much all the time, because football coaches work 7 days a week and pretty much all day long. But that first year, he made it a very good point that if anything bad ever happened, it was kind of my fault. If we were doing a drill on one end of the field, and my dad's going to listen to this, so yes, I am being a little bit sarcastic, but not a lot. But if we were doing a drill on one end of the field and the running backs were on a completely separate practice field, if the running backs fumbled the ball, well, it would be because me as the quarterback had not taught them how to carry it. He went above and beyond to make sure that the other kids didn't think he was treating me any better than he treated them. So that we get through my junior year, and we were decent. We were okay. It wasn't one of the more successful teams my father and the Sweetwater Mustangs had back then. But something clicked my senior year, and it went. And it wasn't a night and day. It wasn't one way one day, and then it didn't flip the very next. There was just a transition where all of a sudden, I guess he just didn't worry about it anymore. And it became one of the best. It went from an experience that I wasn't just loving to one of, hands down, the best experiences of my life that I look back on with nothing but happiness. And I also will say that my dad's my best friend, and that's kind of where that started. And so fast forward years later, and I decide to be a coach, and I was a head football coach, but I also, when I was an assistant, I coached my share of middle school basketball. I coached some freshman basketball. I coached a little powerlifting, a little track and field. But I never coached my sons, and so I move off. Of course, as I stated, I'm a divorced dad, so I'm living off in Fort Worth, and my sons are living up here in Lubbock. And I come watch Hayden, my oldest, play soccer anytime I can on Saturdays. That was the extent of the sports he played. Well, then finally, like I've stated, I wanted to get back closer to my kids, so I got me an administrator's job back here in Lamesa. And okay, so my kids live in Lubbock. Lamesa is 1 hour away. So, yeah, I'm not right next to them, but it's a heck of a lot better than being 5 hours away in Fort Worth. Well, Logan, my youngest, by the time I moved back, he's old enough. He's also playing soccer. So for the first 2 years I'm back, I get to enjoy watching both Logan and Hayden play soccer every Saturday morning. And it's for their church, and it's for a league called Upwards, so it's all positive. Yes, they keep score. Yes, they have wins and losses. Yes, they have champions. Yes, they have trophies. But there is no, you see all those videos of those crazy parents. There's none of that. Everybody's pretty chill. Everybody's pretty relaxed. Well, one summer, my youngest, Logan, suddenly is excited about football, and he wants to try to play flag football, their version of Pee Wee football. It's not padded yet, and he's over at my house. They stay with me for a month every summer, and he's over at my house, and he's just super excited about it. He wants to go out into the front yard and learn routes. He wants me to take him down to the football field, teach him how to catch balls. He wants to learn all the routes. So we're running slants, we're running outs, we're running deep balls, and he's just really excited about it. Well, then the season starts, and it was just a bad experience. And I don't mean a horrible experience. It just wasn't fun for him. And as I watched from the stands, I tried to not be critical, but who are we kidding? When we're parents, we're always going to be critical because it's our kids. But they just never really were invested, not just in Logan, but in any of those kids. And I don't blame the coaches because those coaches aren't getting paid. I'm learning a lot of this now that I'm on the other end of it. Those coaches have full-time jobs. They're volunteering because their own son or daughter is out there. And they're also volunteering. I'm going to tell you this. I learned this because nobody else wants to do it. And so they probably even got guilt-tripped in it. But they just really never even learned a lot of the kids' names. Logan, I don't know that I ever heard him call him by name, and I'm big with that. As a principal of an elementary, I think it's important that we all know all these students' names because I think it gives kids value. But he just didn't have any fun. He never really, there was only 1 or 2 practices. The rest was just games, and they never really taught him a whole lot. They just did their best to get by. And before long, you could tell he had no interest in doing it. Well, like all parents, I would say good parents. I don't know. Me and my ex-wife, Krista, who's a great lady, we fall into that same category of if you're going to start it, you're going to finish it. I don't know if that's good or bad. I think it is because I think it makes kids go through stuff that not necessarily they enjoy because that is life. But it also, at the age of 10, I don't know how much, or I guess he was 9 at the time. I don't know how much of that is registering, but that was the choice we made. And so we finished that football season. I'm not going to lie, I thought we were done with football forever. And that's kind of ironic because I am an ex-head football coach who grew up in the home of a very successful football coach. And I'm not going to lie, I could have cared less if my sons ever played or didn't. My thing with Hayden, the oldest, and Logan, the youngest, and I tell him this all the time, is whatever you do, be involved and be happy. For Hayden, that's turned into music and band. And he's very talented, and he can play the piano, and he can play the guitar, and he teaches himself songs by watching YouTube videos, and he's found friends, and he's in the percussion section, and he's found his groove now that he's in 7th grade. Now, he too, out of the blue this year, decided to play 7th grade football. And no different than Logan, he got picked to be on the A team because Hayden's a pretty good-sized kid, and he's extremely smart, so I knew he'd be coachable, but he just didn't love it. And we would go to the games, and again, sit in the stands, like all parents, not wanting to be critical. We would go to the games, and there would be games where the first game he played 3 or 4 plays. Second game, I don't think he touched the field. Third game, he started and played half the game and did really well. The next game, he didn't touch the field. The next game, he played about every other series and did really well. The next game, he played about 3 plays. The next game, he didn't play at all. And there was really just no rhyme or reason to it. And quickly, Hayden got where I had no doubt he's never going to put on football pads again. And he's very happy that his dad and his mom are not going to make him. Now, we did, just like Logan, make him finish the year. So Logan, at the end of soccer season, because they play soccer in the fall, we're sitting around trying to decide, you going to play basketball? Do you want to play basketball? Because Logan's gotten where he loves to play basketball with his friends during recess at his elementary school. He's in 5th grade. I have a Nerf goal sitting right behind me. I have a whole Nerf court in my house, and when he's here, we play Nerf basketball all the time. But Logan doesn't necessarily love basketball. He just likes to play, and so he wasn't sure if he wanted to do it or not because he's got that bad experience from football. It was a long year for him. He's watched Hayden go through another long year of football. For whatever reason, he decides he wants to try it. And so I'm on the phone with my ex-wife one night, and I say, Krista, I just want it to be a good experience for him because I still remember how excited he was when he was going to play football. And then I also remember how much he just didn't like it. And I don't want that to happen to him again. And Krista says, well, you know, one way that we could keep that from happening, you coach him. Well, I immediately came up with every excuse in the book that I couldn't. I live an hour away. I'm taking superintendent classes. I'm a principal that works, pretty late every night. And I hung up the phone. But then when I hung up the phone, I thought to myself, you don't get to be somebody that complains about stuff. And then when your opportunity comes, you sit there and don't take it. So I called her back and I thought, hey, let's do this. I'll coach him. On the flip side, and I touch on this a lot, Hayden's 13, and I felt like he was 11 just yesterday. And he went from the kid that wanted to just be by my side at all times to a great young man that would rather, though, sit, talk to his friends on the computer, and not necessarily tell his dad everything about his life. And he doesn't want to crawl into bed with me. He doesn't want to snuggle with me. He still loves me, but he's a teenager. And I'm sitting there, and I always say, I want to hold on to Logan as long as I can because I don't know when, but I know sometimes in the next 2 years it's going to flip. Well, that'd be pretty hypocritical of me to say all that, have a chance to coach him, and then not take it. So I decided to do it. So that gets me to why this is going to be a 3-part podcast, because episode 1 is me just getting started coaching my son. Episode 2 is going to be mid-season because we haven't even had a game yet. We've had a couple practices. And then episode 3, I'm going to come back on here at the end of the year and kind of just talk about what the whole thing was like, the whole big picture. So we're sitting here today. It's Sunday, January 9th. And I know it's the 9th because my son Logan, his birthday is on Tuesday the 11th. And so our first game is tomorrow night, January 10th. Now, we've had 2 practices. So I've gone into this deal trying to strike the perfect balance. All right, so I want Logan, first and foremost, because he is my son, and let's be real, you don't volunteer these things. You do want to make sure it's a good experience for everybody, but I wouldn't have volunteered to do this if I didn't want to make it a good experience for my son. All right, so I'm trying to make sure Logan enjoys basketball. I'm also trying to make sure that Logan and my relationship grows from this and does not weaken from this, because I honestly think it could go either way. As a real coach, and I apologize to all the youth coaches out there, that sounds bad, but when I say real coach, I'm not saying you're not a real coach. I'm saying you get profession. Our profession was to coach. All right, so it's totally different. As a middle school paid coach, you don't really take it overly seriously. But as I grew up through the ranks and became a head coach, winning became important. Now, it was never the most important thing. For me, the most important thing was the kids. And I learned that from my father, because my father, who was successful, way more successful than me, will tell you to this day, he never worried about this success for himself. He wanted the success for the kids. When we would lose, or when his teams would lose, he would not be sick to his stomach and upset because he lost. He just knew how much he cared about the kids and wanted them to be successful. And that became me. Now, the difference, though, is, and this is why I say real coach is different from youth coach, wins do matter. And I know for a fact I lost at least one job for not winning enough games. I can venture to say I'll call it 1.5, because we had a mutual separation in another job where I did not win enough games. So you guys, if anybody listens to this outside of the state of Texas, that is real. I was a good educator. I did everything right. We got our numbers. We grew our numbers every time I was in charge of a program. We worked our kids hard. We held them accountable, and we treated them well. Okay? But it is a true, actual thing. It's not just on the movies. If you don't win, you get fired. Now, that may not be the case everywhere, but that is the case here in the state of Texas. All right, so I do have that will to want to win. All right, so going back to this youth team, my number one goal is to make sure that the reason I'm doing it is so Logan and my relationship can grow. That is the reason. But goal number one is to make sure that that comes to fruition. Because I've seen those dads that take it way too seriously. And I honestly saw it most when I was playing back a long time ago from some of my teammates. Some of those dads took it really, really seriously. And it affected the relationship with them and their kid. So that's first and foremost. I don't want that. But here I am on the eve of our first game, and I'm scared to death that we're going to get beat so bad that all of the stuff we're trying to build up via relationship isn't going to matter. Okay, so yeah, that's a hard thing to say, because you'll be like, well, it doesn't matter if you win or lose. But I beg to differ. Okay, and I beg to differ. I know it doesn't matter to Logan. I'm sitting here looking at a picture of my sons, and I can guarantee you he doesn't care if we win or lose. And maybe nobody does, but you trick yourself when you take things like this on, that it does matter to all those other parents. And I will say it matters to the kid. Don't get me wrong. Do I think kids want to go out there and win? Yes. Have I ever thought that kids go home like we do as coaches and think about it for the next 2 weeks on what we could have changed and what we could have done to not give up that extra score? No, I don't. I don't think kids think about it. I think if we win tomorrow, they will be excited for about 30 seconds, and then they're going to go on to whatever's happening in their lives. I think if we lose tomorrow night, they're going to be down for about 30 seconds, and I think they're going to go on with whatever's happening in the rest of their lives. But we as adults are going to worry about it. Me as their coach, I'm going to worry about it. And I'm going to worry about it because I don't want Logan and I don't want these other 8 kids on my basketball team to feel bad about the work they put in. I don't want them to go out there and feel embarrassed or feel bad about themselves. So you could get into this really deep things about everything sports teaches you, because I am a firm believer that sports teaches you great things about how to be successful in life. But I am telling you, because now that I'm on the flip side and I am a first-time youth coach, because I've never been a fan of youth coaches, I can tell you Right? There is pressure on us to do a good job. And the biggest thing, like I'm sitting here nervous on Sunday because I've got no gauge. When I was the head football coach those last 3 years at Castleberry High School in Fort Worth, I knew what Lake Worth had to offer. I knew what Fort Worth Dunbar was going to bring to the table. I had an idea of what we had to accomplish in order to be successful. I have zero clue, y'all. Like, I've got no idea tomorrow when we take that court, what kind of opponents are we going to face? See, I'm a rule follower with this deal. Part of it is because I have to be. So when we go to the draft, and the draft, my son, I kept it a secret from Logan that I was going to coach him. He showed up nervous. He knew I'd be there because I go to everything my sons do. And the tryouts, guys, I told you I never played youth sports, so I didn't know what I was getting into. But the tryouts, I assumed was going to be like the NFL Combine because that's the only tryout I've ever seen. I figured we'd do a little 40-yard dash. We might do some drill work. We might, do some agility work. Maybe they'll even pull out the bench press and we'll get there. But no, what they did was they walk every kid out there. So this is 5th and 6th grade. So they do 6th grade first. They walk every kid out there. And you get the ball, and there's a line of about 100 kids. They say the kid's name. They dribble through some chairs to one end of the court, shoot a layup, get the rebound, dribble back to the other end, shoot a shot. And then they go home. All right, so I'm sitting in the stands with a piece of paper and a whole bunch of other coaches that appear to be taking this way more seriously than I was anticipating. I don't even know what to do, so I give them all a number between 1 and 5. 5 means you're really good. 1 means you're not so bueno. All right, but here's the second part of all this. I don't want to coach anybody's kid that the parents are expecting them to be the next Steph Curry. So if you got a 5, which means you looked really good, I immediately marked you off the list that you were not going to be drafted by my team. The other thing I looked at was all the kids that were wearing all of the accessories. If a kid showed up with the headbands and the shooting sleeves, the little sleeves that going down their arm, and the wristbands, I made a note because I'm not drafting you. Because it means way too much to you, and I am not going to be responsible for a young kid in the 5th or 6th grade's NBA dreams crashing because their coach did not do as good as they should do. So if you were a 5, I didn't draft you. If you were a 4 or a 5 with accessories, I wasn't going to draft you then. And then I'd also watch, after they did their little layup and shoot, I'd watch where they went. I'd watch what kind of families they went to. And if, that family looked pretty dang serious about what was going on, I'd put a star by them. I'm not drafting them either. So I took kids that, in my opinion, they tried really hard. Right? In that little 20-second window of life that I saw them, I made a judgment on that they tried really hard. Maybe I made a snap judgment as to the kind of family that they go and visit with afterwards. And that's the kind of team I got. So my scale of 1 to 5, I have a whole bunch of 2s and 3s on my list. And like I said, guys, I live in Lamesa, which is an hour away. So not only do I do not know what I'm doing with the sport, I don't know the community. I don't know these kids. I felt like all these other coaches, they know people. I felt like they knew other people in the building. I know Logan, I know Hayden, and I know their small group of friends. So I made sure I asked Logan, do you know any of these kids? And I put stars by everybody he knew, and I tried to get a couple. I only got 1. And so far, that kid's the only one that hadn't been to practice. So it's been interesting. So we start the practices, and we get an email. I'm waiting because tryouts were quite a while ago, and we finally get an email that says we can start scheduling practice. And so the first week, which was last week, you can schedule no more than 2. All right, and then after that, the games start. And during the weeks we have games, you can do no more than 3. So I scheduled a practice for, let me think for a minute, last Wednesday or Tuesday, and then a practice for Saturday. These practices are an hour long. And so the first practice, first time I've ever seen these kids since the draft, which was the first time I've ever seen these kids in their entire life. So I just decided, the first thing I got to figure out is what they can and cannot do. And so I go in there and I have a list of drills, and that practice felt like it took forever. I felt like I got through everything I wanted to do, and we still had 30 minutes left. 9 kids on the team, 8 of them have been at practice. So we shot right-hand layups, left-hand layups, jump shots on the right, jump shots on the left. Let them all jack up one three-pointer to see who could and could not get it to the rim. We shot some free throws, put them in a defensive stance. We shuffled right, we shuffled left, we shuffled with drop steps. We worked on ball handling, right hand, left hand, right hand with pivots, left hand with pivots. And I had them kind of go against you, just seeing what they could do. And then when they left there, I gave them all a number. All right, so everybody's numbered between 1 and 5. There's 2 people number ones. There's 2 guys labeled number 2s, 2 number 3s, 2 number 4s, and then I have 3 guys that I plan to be 4 and 5 so they can play multiple spots. So that's practice 1. Well, practice 2 was yesterday morning, and of course I go thinking, well, crap, this is the only other practice we got till we play. So I got to teach them offense. I got to teach them defense. I got to teach them inbounds. I want to press. I got to teach them how to press. But what if somebody presses us? We got to learn how to press break. We got to learn how to line up for a jump ball. Well, as long as the first practice was, this practice flew by. I got an offense taught, and I got a defense taught. And then with 3 minutes left, this was from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. At 10:57, I kind of showed them how to press. That's as far as we got. So that's where we're at going into game number 1 tomorrow night at 6 o'clock in Lubbock. We do not have practice this week because we play Monday and Wednesday, and I'm not going to schedule practice on my son's birthday. That's the plus to being a Pee Wee coach and the only coach. That's the other side of this deal is I have no assistant. I do think my ex-wife would jump in and help out if I had to have her, and she actually has some basketball experience, played basketball in college. I think her new husband would jump in and help out, but neither one of them really want to, so I'm going to try not to ask them to. So I'm the only coach. And our jerseys are missing. We're the only team that they don't know where our jerseys are. They asked me, do you think one of your parents or your assistant coach picked them up? And I said, well, 1, I don't have an assistant coach, and 2, I don't know any of my parents, so my bet is no. So they've guaranteed me our jerseys are going to miraculously show up before our game tomorrow night. So as we get ready tomorrow night, like I said, I got no idea what we're walking into. Logan is not the best and not the worst. You know, that's kind of all of my kids. You know, I have on my team of 9 kids, 8 that I really have seen. There's some decent ones. There's some that struggle a little, and there's everybody in between. And I think most kids in life fall everywhere in between. But what am I going to walk into tomorrow night? Because Lubbock Cooper, there's some pretty well-off parents. Do some of them have access to a gym instead of the 2 practices that have to be half court? That was the other thing in the email was all your practices will be half court. Have they found a full court practice where they can go and have a little extra practice? Are we going to show up to somebody that has a Steph Curry extraordinaire junior that can just jack it up from 3, that they're going to beat us 83-0? I don't know. I have no gauge. I just know that I'm sitting here worried, stressed, which is one of the reasons I quit coaching, because I want our kids, and specifically my Logan Ritchie, whose birthday is Tuesday, to feel good about themselves when they're done tomorrow night. It's all I care about. And I just hope that I've done enough in these short practices that we can accomplish that. All right, so we're going to wrap this up. This is episode 1. Episode 2 of this one is going to come sometime in the middle of the season, and you'll kind of know how we're doing. We'll either win them all, lose them all, or be somewhere in between. And my hope is we're somewhere in between. If you were to say today, hey, you can make a deal with the devil to not lose every game but not win every game, you can be somewhere in the middle. I'd probably take it. That sounds horrible. But I don't want to lose every game because I don't want to show back up for practice and for all these other games with kids thinking they're just going to get trashed every week. But maybe we're really prepared. I don't know. Couldn't tell you. We're going to find out. All right, and in the last episode will be a postseason review as to how this went and am I ever going to do it again. So thank you guys for listening. This has been ACOS, all kinds of stuff. And obviously, we talked about being a bit of parenting today. I'm going to flip gears next on the next episode and kind of change the pace a little bit. But thank you guys for listening. And I do hope you tune in to see. And to clarify two things, my dad is a great man. He did want to make sure I wasn't treated any better. But it just like everything, nothing is as bad as what we remember. And two, I'm not really going to make any deals with the devil. I'm a good man. But I do want my kids to feel good about themselves. All right, guys, have a great week. I hope you had a great first week of January, and I hope next week is just as great. Thank you guys for listening. You have been listening to ACOS Podcast, All Kinds of Stuff, with your host, David Ritchie. And I sincerely want to thank you for stopping by and giving us a chance. The music you hear now and the music you hear at the beginning of our podcast was done by my 13-year-old son, Hayden Ritchie. And everything I do is inspired by not just Hayden, but my other son, Logan Ritchie, as well. You can find me at Twitter, at ACOS Podcast. That is capital A, capital K, capital O, capital S, capital P, and everything else is in little letters, at ACOS Podcast. Feel free to follow me, reach out with any questions you have. Have a great week. Thank you for listening.